The front door slammed shut. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, my breath shallow. I had no plan, no destination, just an unbearable need to escape. Josh hadn't even looked up when I left. 15 years of marriage, and I could have been a ghost. 2 hours earlier, I stood in the dining room, staring at the table. Candlelight flickered against the wine glasses. A perfectly cooked steak sat untouched. My dress, the one Josh used to love, felt ridiculous now. Write in the comments where you're listening to us from. What happened when he opened the door shocked me. The clock read 9:17 p.m. when the front door finally creaked open. Josh walked in, loosening his tie, eyes on his phone.
No flowers. No smile.
Not even a hey. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Did you forget something? He didn't even glance up. Huh. I gritted my teeth. Our anniversary. Josh blinked like the word meant nothing. Then shrugged.
Oh, right.
Long day at work. That was it.
No apology.
No effort. My chest tightened. My nails dug into my palm. 15 years. And I was invisible. I grabbed my coat. My heels clicked against the floor as I headed for the door. Josh barely reacted. Didn't ask where I was going. I slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I drove fast, city lights blurring past, my heart pounding. Then I saw it, the Blue Orchid.
A bar.
Somewhere I could breathe. Inside, the air was thick with whiskey, low laughter, the bass of some old rock song. I slid onto a stool, my pulse still racing. What can I get you? The bartender barely glanced up. Something strong. A glass appeared. I took a sip, then another. Let it burn. Let it numb. Someone slid onto the stool beside me. Rough night. The voice was smooth. A little amused. I turned. And there he was.
Tall.
Dark hair. Blue eyes locked onto mine. The kind of man who knows he's trouble.
He smirked.
Let me guess. Anniversary? I stared at him. The ring on your finger, he said. And the way you're looking at that drink like it personally offended you. I let out a dry laugh. Smart guy. He held out his hand. I'm Alex. I hesitated. My brain whispered don't. But I shook his hand anyway. And just like that, everything changed. My pulse hammered as Alex's fingers brushed mine. The air between us felt charged, like the split second before lightning strikes. I should have pulled away. I should have walked out. But I didn't. I don't usually do this, I muttered, swirling my drink, eyes locked on the amber liquid. Alex smirked. Neither do I. I laughed. You say that too easily. He leaned in just slightly, his cologne, a mix of cedar and something darker, pulling me in. Because I mean it. His voice was smooth, confident, like a man who never had to chase. The kind of man who knew exactly when to push and when to let you come to him. And I was coming to him. God help me. Another drink. Then another. The warmth of the alcohol mixed with his attention, his eyes holding mine longer than they should. You deserve more than whatever made you storm in here like that, Alex murmured, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. I exhaled sharply. You don't even know me. He smirked. Maybe not. But I know that look. I swallowed. What look? His voice dropped lower. Like a woman who hasn't felt wanted in a long time. A sharp breath hitched in my throat. He wasn't wrong. The hotel room door clicked shut behind us. I didn't think. Couldn't. All I knew was his mouth on mine, his hands in my hair, my back against the wall. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Morning. The sheets were cold beside me. The space where he had been, empty. For a moment, I lay still, staring at the ceiling, my heartbeat steady, but my mind spinning. Then I saw it. A note on the pillow. Thank you for a night I won't forget. I traced the ink with my fingertips. My throat tightened.
No promises. No expectations.
Just this. I should have felt regret.
Guilt.
Instead, I felt something worse. I wanted more. I thought I could leave it behind. One night. One mistake. Something that belonged to the darkness of that hotel room, erased by morning light. But life doesn't work that way. It hit me like a slap when I heard his name. I was in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug, trying to focus on the warmth instead of the cold pit in my stomach. Josh sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, his voice a dull hum in the background. And then, like a knife slicing through my fragile sense of control, I heard it. Alex Parker. I froze. The world narrowed. Josh was talking about him, about a new business partner, about how I'd like him, about how he was smart, capable, someone important. The room tilted. I forced my hands to stay steady, forced my face into something neutral, forced myself to breathe. I had spent the entire morning trying to push away the memory of Alex's touch, the way his fingers had traced my skin, the way his voice had lingered in my mind. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was over. And now he was walking straight into my life. The hours crawled by. My mind raced through every possibility. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I wasn't. The doorbell rang that evening, and every muscle in my body tensed. Josh opened the door with the kind of enthusiasm he never showed at home anymore. And then there he was, Alex, standing in my doorway, wearing the same confidence he had the night before, only now it was sharper, more controlled, more dangerous. His eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it. That flicker of amusement, of recognition. A silent message between us. I know. And now you do too. I gripped the kitchen counter, my pulse hammering in my throat. The space between us felt too small, suffocating, charged with a kind of tension that couldn't be ignored. He was supposed to be gone, a ghost of a decision I never should have made. But ghosts don't stay buried. He extended a hand toward me. I hesitated just for a second too long. His grip was firm, steady, but I felt the pressure of his fingers, the silent dare in the way he held on just a fraction longer than necessary. I was trapped. In my own home, with my husband standing right there, oblivious. I had walked into a fire, and now there was no way out without getting burned. Secrets have a way of tightening around you, like invisible chains. I thought I could pretend, thought I could smile, nod, and play the role of the perfect wife. But when I sat across from Alex at my own dinner table, I realized he had planned this. I moved through the kitchen, setting plates, pouring wine, my hands steady even though my heart was slamming against my ribs. Josh laughed at something Alex said, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. I stole a glance at Alex. He was too relaxed, too at ease in my home. His fingers drummed lightly against the table, his eyes sharp, studying me when he thought no one was looking. Or maybe he wanted me to see. The candlelight flickered between us, casting shadows that felt too familiar. My skin still remembered his touch. The way his breath had felt against my neck. The way I had let myself want him. And now he was here, with my husband. Josh reached for the wine bottle, filling Alex's glass, grinning. Emily outdid herself tonight. She makes it look easy. Alex lifted his glass. She's full of surprises. His voice was smooth, unreadable, but the words landed like a strike. I stiffened, my fingers gripping the napkin in my lap. I could feel it, his amusement, his control. This wasn't just coincidence. He knew who I was that night. I had been played. The fork in my hand felt too heavy. My pulse roared in my ears. I needed space, air, anything to break free from the suffocating weight of his presence. I'll get dessert, I said, my voice too tight. I pushed back my chair, my legs unsteady as I made my way to the kitchen. The second I was out of sight, I braced myself against the counter, exhaling sharply. My reflection in the window stared back at me, wide eyes, flushed cheeks, guilt etched into my face. The floor creaked behind me. I turned too quickly. Alex, standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, that same knowing smirk on his lips. "I knew exactly who you were that night," he said, voice low, controlled. My stomach dropped.
Of course he did.
Of course I had been nothing but a game. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Why are you here?" He stepped closer. "Because now you have a secret. And secrets," he said, tilting his head, "are so much more fun when they're dangerous." The air between us was thick, charged with something unspoken, unresolved, uncontrollable. Footsteps echoed from the dining room. Josh was coming. Alex stepped back, eyes never leaving mine. "You should bring out the dessert," he murmured. "Wouldn't want to ruin a perfect evening." And just like that, he walked away, leaving me standing there,
Trapped. Cornered.
and completely at his mercy. I should have walked away the second I saw him standing in my doorway. Should have excused myself, grabbed my coat, and left. But I didn't. Because part of me needed to know why. Why he was here. Why he was acting like this was all some big joke. Why I felt the air crackling between us even as my entire life threatened to collapse. I set my fork down, barely touching my food. The conversation between Josh and Alex blurred in the background, just noise to fill the space. My pulse pounded in my ears. Alex was too comfortable, too sure of himself, like he already knew how this would play out. And then, as if he could read my mind, his eyes met mine across the table. A slow, calculated glance. "I knew who you were that night." The words weren't spoken out loud, but I heard them, felt them sink into my skin like ice. I gripped my wine glass, forcing myself to breathe. After dinner, I barely made it to the kitchen before I heard him behind me. "I need to know," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. Was this all a coincidence? Alex leaned against the counter, arms crossed.
No.
The world tilted. I swallowed. "You knew." His smirk didn't reach his eyes this time. I did. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. So what was I, then? My voice was shaking now. A setup? A way to amuse yourself? His jaw tightened. A way to get to Josh. My breath hitched. "You were never the target, Emily," he said, voice low. He was. The words crashed into me, each one worse than the last.
He had used me.
Not just as some reckless fling, but as part of something bigger.
Josh.
My husband. The man who barely noticed me anymore. Alex stepped closer. I should have backed away, but I didn't. "Your husband screwed me over," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "Years ago. A business deal that cost me everything." He walked away clean. I didn't. I felt sick. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Alex continued. "You and me. That night." His gaze darkened. "That was real." I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. "You expect me to believe that?" His fingers grazed my wrist. I flinched, but not because I wanted to pull away. Because I didn't. Because even now, even after everything, my body betrayed me. "Believe what you want," he murmured. "But tell me, when was the last time he looked at you the way I do?" I hated him for saying it, because the answer was never, and I had no idea what to do with that. I should have cut him off that night. Should have told him to stay away, to leave my life before he burned it to the ground. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I was already standing in the fire. It started with a text. A single message 2 days after that dinner. "Meet me." No place. No time. Just that. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. I should have deleted it. Instead, I typed back. "Where?" The first time, it was a hotel downtown. The moment I stepped into the dimly lit room, Alex was on me. No small talk, no hesitation, just hands gripping, lips crashing, a heat that swallowed me whole. Afterward, I lay tangled in the sheets, my skin still burning. My mind screamed, "Stop this now," but my body was already craving the next time. And there was a next time. And another. We stole moments wherever we could. Empty parking lots, late-night drives, corners of the city where no one would recognize us. Every time I told myself it was the last. Every time I let it happen again. At home, I moved through my days like a stranger in my own life. Josh didn't notice. Or maybe he just didn't care. He left early, came home late, barely looked up from his phone during dinner. It used to hurt. Now it didn't. Because now I had a secret. And the worst part? I didn't regret it. One night, after slipping back into the house from another stolen hour with Alex, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and just watched Josh. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through emails, completely unaware that his wife had just been in another man's arms. I tried to feel guilty. I waited for the shame to hit me. But all I felt was empty. Because I knew then, with absolute certainty, our marriage had been over long before Alex came into my life. He just made me see it. Secrets always have an expiration date. I knew it. I just didn't expect mine to explode so suddenly. It happened on a Tuesday. A day like any other. Or so I thought. Alex and I had slipped away to a quiet corner of the city, a hotel room we'd used before. It was supposed to be quick. Just an hour. One last time I had told myself. The same lie I always told. But when I stepped out of the hotel, fixing my coat, adjusting my hair, Josh was standing there. The world stopped. For a second, I thought maybe I had imagined him. That my guilt had finally manifested into something real. But then he blinked, exhaled, and I saw it. Not rage. Not betrayal. Just pain. We drove home in silence. I gripped my hands in my lap, waiting for the explosion. It never came. Josh parked in the driveway, but he didn't get out right away. He just sat there, staring ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. Almost too steady. "I think we both know this has been over for a long time." The words hit harder than screaming ever could. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because he was right. Josh sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I'm not going to fight you, Emily. I won't be that guy. But I need to know, was it just him? Or were you already gone before he showed up?" The truth clawed at my throat. I had been gone long before Alex. But I couldn't say it. So I just whispered, "I'm sorry." Josh nodded, like he had already known the answer. "We should end this before we start hating each other." Divorce. I should have felt relief. Instead, all I felt was freefall. I barely had time to process what was happening before my phone buzzed. A text from Alex. "Come to me. Now." Something felt off. Alex was never the one to panic. Never the one to sound desperate. But something in those words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and drove. To him. To whatever came next. The glass shattered before I even saw his fist move. Alex stood over the table, chest rising and falling, his face twisted in something I had never seen before, real anger. Not the smug confidence. Not the smooth control. Raw. Unfiltered. Dangerous. "You're leaving?" His voice was sharp, the words cutting through the silence. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my coat. This was never real, Alex. A bitter laugh escaped him. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Not real." He turned, eyes locking onto mine. "You think what we had was fake?" I forced myself to hold his gaze. "I think you used me to get to Josh. And I think I let you." His jaw clenched. He knew I was right. Alex had been a storm, thrilling, reckless, consuming. But now? Now all I saw was the wreckage. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered. He didn't stop me when I walked out. But something told me this wasn't the end. For a while, I thought maybe I had won. The divorce papers were signed. Josh moved out. I found a place of my own. A fresh start. Then small things started happening. I got to work one morning and my boss called me in. They were letting me go. Downsizing, they said. But the way they avoided my eyes told me something else. The next week, my landlord revoked my lease, a sudden mix-up in paperwork. Then the final blow. My bank account. Frozen. Every attempt to fix it led to nothing. Calls were ignored. Doors were closed. And then a single message arrived. From Josh. You didn't think I'd just let you go, did you? My breath hitched. Josh had never been the type to explode. Never been the type to chase revenge. But this was calculated. I had underestimated him. And now he was going to ruin me. I checked my bank app again.
0.
Not just empty, frozen. Panic clawed at my throat. Rent was due in 3 days. My car payment overdue. My savings?
Gone.
I gripped my phone, dialing Josh's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. And again.
Nothing.
My hands trembled as I sent a message instead. What the hell did you do? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He was toying with me. I had underestimated him. That night, I showed up at his office. The receptionist barely looked up. He's not available. I don't care. My voice was sharp. I wasn't leaving. Then, as if on cue, the glass doors to his office swung open. Josh stood there, leaning against the frame, smiling. Emily, he said, like we were old friends. I was wondering when you'd show up. I pushed past the receptionist, stepping inside. What did you do? Josh moved behind his desk, calm, controlled. I'm just reminding you what happens when you burn everything down. I slammed my hands against his desk. You're destroying my life. Josh's expression didn't change.
No, Emily.
You did that the moment you chose him. My stomach twisted. You didn't think there'd be consequences? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Did you really think you could humiliate me? Lie to me? And I'd just walk away? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. This wasn't the Josh I knew. This wasn't the distracted, distant husband who had barely looked at me. This was someone else. And that terrified me. I barely made it back to my apartment before the next hit came. An eviction notice. A final notice.
No warnings. No explanations.
I sank to the floor, my pulse racing. He was cutting me off from everything. And then, a knock at the door.
Loud. Urgent.
My breath hitched. I got up slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. Another knock. Harder this time. I swallowed. Then, with shaky hands, I cracked the door open and froze. Because standing there, his face unreadable, was Alex. His shirt was stained with blood. My phone kept buzzing, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. I already knew what it was. More eviction notices, more rejections, more proof that Josh was tightening the noose around my life. And then came the knock at the door.
Loud.
Insistent. My stomach twisted. My first thought was Josh. My second was Alex. I took a slow breath, forcing my hands to stop shaking before I cracked the door open. A man stood there. Someone I had never seen before. Tall, mid-40s, dressed in a sharp, dark coat. Everything about him was calm, controlled, like someone who already knew how this was going to play out. Emily Carter? His voice was even, polite, but there was something else underneath. Something sharp. I hesitated. Who's asking? He reached into his coat, pulling out a card. Ryan Graves. Private investigator. I took it, my fingers brushing over the raised letters. I think you already know why I'm here, he said. I didn't. But the way my chest tightened told me I was about to find out. Ryan stepped inside, moving with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen too much. I closed the door, crossing my arms. What do you want? He studied me for a moment before speaking. I was hired to look into your husband. My heart skipped. By who? Ryan's gaze didn't waver. His own business partner. The air thinned. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. Ryan sighed. Josh is making moves, Emily. Big ones. And from what I've been told, he's not planning to stop until he takes everything from you. A cold wave of realization crashed over me. He wasn't just freezing my accounts. He wasn't just ruining me. He was erasing me. Ryan leaned against the counter, watching me carefully. You need to start asking yourself the right questions. I swallowed. Like what? He held my gaze. Like why your husband didn't react when he caught you and Alex. A chill ran down my spine. Ryan tapped his fingers against the counter. Most men would have lost it, would have yelled, would have demanded answers. Josh didn't. He tilted his head. He let you go, almost like he wanted you to leave. I replayed that moment in my head, the way Josh had looked through me, like I had already stopped existing to him. Ryan was right. It wasn't normal. My hands felt ice cold. What are you saying? Ryan exhaled. I'm saying you weren't just his wife. You were his leverage. The room spun. I gripped the counter, trying to make sense of it all. Josh had ignored me for years, treated me like an afterthought. And then, the moment I left, he moved fast, cutting off my finances, pulling strings, shutting every door before I could even knock. Because he hadn't just wanted me gone. He wanted to control how I disappeared. Ryan watched me, his expression unreadable. I don't know what he's planning, Emily. But I do know this, you're running out of time. I stared at him, my pulse pounding. Josh had spent years pretending I wasn't there. Now, suddenly, I was a problem to be erased. And I had no idea how far he was willing to go. Ryan sat across from me, his expression unreadable. I gripped the edge of the table, my mind spinning. What do you mean, everything is in my name? My voice came out sharper than I expected. Ryan exhaled, flipping open a folder I hadn't even noticed he was carrying. Inside, pages and pages of documents. Your husband isn't as smart as he thinks he is, Ryan said, tapping one of the pages. He's been shifting assets under your name for years. Real estate, stocks, offshore accounts. It's how he's been avoiding taxes. My breath caught. That doesn't make sense. I've never signed anything. Ryan gave me a knowing look. You didn't have to. He forged a lot of it. Other times, he probably had you sign papers you didn't even read. A memory flickered. Josh handing me stacks of documents over the years. Just sign at the bottom. It's routine. My stomach twisted. I had trusted him. Never questioned it. Ryan continued. He kept everything looking normal on paper. You're just the spouse. No red flags. But the moment you left him, you became a liability. I felt sick. So, what does this mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan leaned back, his eyes sharp. It means Josh doesn't own a damn thing. I blinked. Ryan's lips curled into a smirk. You do. I stared at the documents, my pulse pounding in my ears. All this time, Josh had played the perfect game. He had built his empire, secured his wealth, and made sure no one could trace it back to him. Except for one flaw.
Me.
He never expected you to leave, Ryan said, as if reading my mind. As long as you were his obedient wife, everything stayed under control.
But now.
He gestured at the papers. Now you hold all the power. I shook my head, still struggling to process it. Josh doesn't make mistakes. Ryan's smirk didn't fade. He made this one. I pressed my fingers against my temple, trying to think. Josh had been meticulous for years. He had manipulated, controlled, planned for every outcome. But he had never planned for me to walk away. That was his weakness. I was his weakness. A slow realization crept in. If everything was in my name, I lifted my gaze to Ryan. Can I take it from him? Ryan's smirk widened. Not just take it, Emily. You can bury him. A shiver ran down my spine. I had spent so long feeling powerless, trapped in a marriage where I was invisible, a woman with no choices. Now, for the first time, I had all the control. Josh had spent years trying to erase me. Now, I was about to erase him. I stared at the documents spread across the table, my mind racing. Josh had built everything in my name, and now, without realizing it, he had handed me the knife to cut him down. Ryan leaned forward. We have to move fast. If Josh figures out what I know, he'll try to…
Bang!
The door slammed open, hitting the wall so hard a picture frame crashed to the floor. My breath caught. Josh stood in the doorway. For a second, none of us moved. Josh's eyes swept the room, locking onto the papers, then shifting to Ryan. His jaw clenched. So, he said, voice eerily calm, this is what we're doing now. My pulse roared in my ears. How had he known? How did he get here so fast? Ryan didn't flinch. You should have been more careful with your paperwork. Josh's lips curled in a slow, dangerous smile. You really think she's going to go through with this? His eyes flicked to me. You really think you can take me down, Emily? Something snapped inside me. For years, I had let him control everything. Let him decide what I could have, what I deserved. And now, even when I was the one holding the power, he still thought he could talk down to me. I stood up. Josh's smirk faltered. I don't think, Josh, I said, voice steady. I know, but before I could say another word, Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something that made my stomach drop. His expression changed. Ryan looked up at me. We need to go. Now. My breath hitched.
What?
Why? He didn't answer. Just turned the phone toward me. My blood ran cold. A security camera feed. My apartment complex. 4 men in suits were walking into the lobby. Josh's voice was calm.
Too calm.
You didn't think I'd just let you take everything, did you? I froze. This wasn't over. Josh had just made his next move. And if we didn't get out now, I wasn't sure I'd survive it.